spread a little aloha around the world. And breakfast with Bob.
Thank you, Pacho Man. Welcome back, everybody. Breakfast with Bob, our Not Quite Kona edition. We are brought to you by Master Spas, Hoka Fly Human Fly, DeBoer Wetsuits, Quintana Roo, and our Challenged Athletes Foundation. In our first 30 years, CAF has now raised over $180 million, sent out over 48,000 grants to keep challenged athletes in the game of life through sport. Our next guest, two-time Paralympian. Her background is pretty spectacular. Kelly Elmlinger joins us. Kelly, how you doing?
I'm all right. Thanks for having me today, Bob. I really appreciate it.
Kelly, when I look through your background, it's pretty amazing everything you've accomplished. So, growing up, what were your sports growing up?
Oh gosh. Kind of
Everything?
like now, I feel like it was everything. But what did I really hone in on? I honed in on running, specifically cross country and track, more of the middle distances in track and in basketball. Basketball was my first true love. It's still, a huge love for me. It's just I think it was the team aspect. I really, really enjoyed growing up. And plus, I could just go outside and practice, so much on my own right there in the backyard. So, but I played football. I did anything, the guys did, the cousins did. So I was very, very active growing up.
And so you're a sophomore in college. And where'd you go to college?
So I ended up going to a small university in Ohio. So I grew up outside of Cleveland, Ohio, and it's called
Okay.
Tippin University. They specialize in law enforcement.
Okay. And so sophomore in college, you enlisted as an Army medic and served 10
Yes.
years. Now, like you said, you love teams. So I'm assuming that led to, okay, I'm going in the military. And was there a family background there where the family is military based?
I mean, there's a few family members, but not the historical background that some other people come to. For me, I just had this affinity after seeing Desert Storm when I was about 12 or 13. I was just like, there was something about that, seeing it on television and feeling like this is something that I want to be a part of. And I always kept that in the back of my head. Went to college initially for sports,
Right,
which isn't
right.
the best reason to choose college. And then I just realized like that wasn't my true path in life. So that's when I said, I'm going to the military.
82nd Airborne Division, Combat Aviation Unit, three back-to-back deployments, Iraq and Afghanistan. What sticks out to you from your time over in Iraq and Afghanistan?
I mean, many things, but probably one of the more honorable things that took me a very long time to kind of come to grips with, is seeing it as more of like a honorable, proud thing, was carrying our fellow brethren off the battlefield. Unfortunately, in Iraq, we ran out of body bags pretty early on in the deployment, and that's when I knew things were different. And that changes you. It really changes how you see things, how you look at things, your perspective of how you go about life. And um, I mean, 9/11, I think, changed us all in some aspects if we were old enough to remember it. And then I think, then for me, being over in all those deployments, truly, but especially the first one I made to Iraq, we lost a lot of service members.
Oh my God, that's it. So then when you're done, you were in for 10 years, and then
20 years, Bob.
you
I
went
was
and
in for 20
you served
years.
10 years with the airborne, and then what were the
Yes.
next 10?
So I did almost 13 years as a combat medic, and then I commissioned as a nurse. So I was able to go to nursing school at UNC, and then I asked to be stationed down in San Antonio, which is one of like the main kind of places for specifically for the Army, where we had a
Yes.
lot of wounded warriors. So I said I want to use all my deployment history, and be able to give this service back to inpatient nursing care, and that being able to work on the inpatient ortho floor. And while my time was short up there because my medical issues came up,
Right.
I loved it. I loved the interaction. I loved the connecting with the people, and not just the patients. These patients stayed on our floor for months. So it was their kids, it was their grandparents, it was their cousins. I made friends and family with all of those, individuals. And that was extremely just heartwarming, to be able to have that
Sure.
connection with so many.
2013, experiencing pain in your lower left leg. You were doing some serious running, diagnosed synovial sarcoma, a rare form of soft tissue cancer. Uh, Being a nurse, you sort of know a little bit what's going on.
Yeah.
How quickly did, because a lot of people, something like that happens and they salvage and salvage and salvage. How long did it take you to make that decision that, you know what, if I want
Uh,
to move on, I need to amputate?
Yeah, yes, exactly. You're absolutely right about the going on and on and on. And I saw patients do that I took care of. I saw friends do that. I was able to start, seeing people that would do that. For me, I had a lot of graft sites as well. So I was afraid to get rid of the leg because I had so many parts and pieces moved from other areas of my body into the leg. And I just felt like I needed to stick with it. However, it ended up being like 3 years that I kept the leg, but I was in and out of the hospital for almost a year. So it took me a while to even get to the point where I could rehab. And
Right.
then I went out to say I delayed it heavily, but there were some things going on at life that I just said, it's not the right time. I got my answer of my surgeon said he would go ahead and do the amputation, but I was just like, hey, let's give it a little bit because I need to get some of these life things done. But when I asked my surgeon, he just said, look, if we have not met your expectations with limb salvage, then let's go ahead and do the amputation. And I'll be honest with you, that was probably one of the more memorable days that sticks out because I just knew my life was going to be better. My life was not well mentally, physically hanging on to that leg. So the amputation was by far the best answer in the best direction that I could have taken.
It was interesting the other day. I was in the cold plunge. There was a guy there with a prosthetic, and we got to talking. He grew up in Mexico, motorcycle accident, salvaged the leg for 25 years. 25 years before he came
That's
to the
tough.
US and had the amputation, and see if we're getting him a running leg now. But 25 years, and that's not that rare. People,
It really isn't. And I think that's part of the stigma that I like to kind of break as well between one of my mental health providers and then also my surgeon. They've asked me to speak to multiple service members and even now outside of just the military community about people, debating whether or not to hang on their leg with limb salvage. And, you know, obviously it's got to be their choice. Each person's situation is different, but I like to at least go in and be like, your life is not over, trust me. Like it's a new way of life, but you can make that life as successful as you want. And dragging around something that holds you back mentally and physically and then being able to get rid of that, I mean, it's such a freeing mental aspect that I think that really it just makes you open and more optimistic about like, okay, I can move forward. It feels very oxymoron. Like I'm going to cut off a body part to be better. But in all reality, like
yeah,
you are.
yes. Well, because you're one, and I've heard you this over, you don't realize how much pain you're in until it's gone, right?
Very true.
And then the other thing is all the medication. You're on this medication, so you don't sleep. You're not sleeping. You're sort of you're zombie-esque. And then all of a sudden things change. The leg is removed, and you're like, oh my God, I have a new lease on life. Let's go. And then I see you 2015, 2016, LA Marathon, Boston Marathon in a racing chair. So
Yes.
you're taking your love of the marathon and you're doing it in a chair. You're Wait, and then your first try was 3 weeks. 3 weeks before. Wait, first try was 3 weeks before getting your first running leg.
So I didn't even have a run leg. I had an all-purpose leg for my first triathlon. And that 3 weeks prior to that, my prosthetist said, hey, here's this all-purpose leg. And at the time I got with the program manager for Paratri and I said, there's a triathlon that's, up the street. I'd like to do it. And she said, yes, it will qualify for you to try to get into nationals. And I was like, went to my prosthetist and I said, hey, I know this leg isn't finished, but wrap it up, make it however safe that you think you need to have it safe because I'm doing this race. The sheer fear on his face when I told him that, because I'm on a temporary socket, like
Right.
that's
It could break.
potentially dangerous, can
Yep.
break. I don't know, but like I just sat on the sidelines for almost 5 years in terms of like doing sports that I really wanted to do.
Right.
While I loved some of those other adaptive sports, it just didn't feel like me. And I felt like triathlon, I was just like, okay, I'm ready to get into it. I want to try this. Like there was something about it that I'm just like, this seems like something I'm going to gravitate towards. So I said, let's do this. We did it. I got a qualifying time, and by the time I got to nationals, we had a proper leg. But yeah, that first one was, yeah, that was a little bit of a hitch in the plan from a prosthetist.
What was it about the sport of triathlon was so appealing to you?
I think the challenge.
Yeah.
I mean, I've always been a runner, so I knew that the running aspect, and then it being glass, and I feel like let's. And triathlon kind of went for initially. Initially, it went from my desire to swim is a little lower on the scale than the other two, and then
Mhm.
biking. I've always loved biking, and then running like that. That's it. Like I know running. I did running, before I even knew what the word athlete was and probably what the
Sure.
word running was. So, but I think it was the challenge of taking in definitely swimming, a sport that I did not have a background in, and then biking. I had a background, but not the background at the elite level, needed for paratri or just triathlons in general. And then I think when it comes to like practice and constantly wanting to make progress, for me, everyone talks about like practice meet or practice makes perfection, and I'm like, no, practice makes progress. Practice makes you prepared, and that's the thing for me is I love the repetition because not everything goes correct, but when you practice even things not going correctly, that's
Mhm.
life. And that's the other thing that I liked about it is there were so many moving elements that I'm like, I want to take on this challenge of trying a new sport and then putting together sports that I love all together.
So 2018 USA Paratriathlon Developmental Athlete of the Year. So obviously you're having success pretty quickly. Um, and you won what? You win 2018 USA Paratriathlon National Champs and there's second triathlon as an amputee. And
Yeah.
then you freaking go to Tokyo.
Yeah.
You
Well,
go to third.
let me tell you what my third triathlon was as
Yeah.
an amputee. It was Worlds. It was Worlds 2018. That is my third triathlon. I just got a coach and I tell her, hey, I'm going to Worlds. And she's like, what? Hang on. What is going on here? But it happened to be that, someone in my category, she had retired. It opened up a spot and they said, Kelly, do you want to take it? And again, I'm tired of being on the sidelines.
Yeah.
I had no idea what I was getting into, but
Who
honestly,
cares?
I
Yeah.
did.
You're in.
I was like, it's an opportunity. I'm taking it.
I'm all in. I love it. And so then you qualify for Tokyo. Now, if the games had been if they happened in 2020, would you still have gone, or did you need that extra year?
No, I still would have
Yeah.
gone. So, but my category wasn't selected. So I actually raced up. So I'm a PTS4.
Yes.
So PTS4 wasn't a medal contending. It's
Oh,
only PTS5 women. So I actually
yes.
raced up basically with women who have more ability than me. So I raced against those women for the whole qualification period, was able to get enough points to still make the team even as a PTS5, even though I'm classified as a 4.
Right. What was that Paralympic experience like for you?
To me, making the team was already the gold medal.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
going to Tokyo, like I was not expected to win a medal. I know that. Like again, these are women that have more ability than me. That's why we have different categories. But it was just like the icing on the cake. I was there to enjoy it. I feel like we put in so much hard work, we put in so much strategy, and it was like not a lot of people saw me being able to make it as an outside shot. But my coach believed in me, my process believed in me, and I believed in me. And to that, like that was the gold medal right there. Like it was go out, enjoy it.
Yeah.
And I did. Even
Right.
though it was COVID, there were so many people outside
Right.
in lining the streets. I was
Yeah.
high-fiving like my arm was tired from high-fiving people because I was like, I am going to enjoy this. These people have come out in a COVID year. They
Yes.
are breaking the Japan rules. I'm like, I'm going to show them appreciation. And it was that moment right there is when I realized I know why people train for 4 years to go
Yeah.
back to one race. And I
Exactly.
said, I want to experience this again. If I have the opportunity, I want to experience this again.
Well, so you end up seventh in Tokyo, which is awesome because you went there on a, hey, who knows if I'll ever get back here again. I'm going to enjoy
Exactly.
every minute of this. Then you win your first world championship in Abu Dhabi, right? 2021. Win your second one in 2023, and that qualifies you for Paris. And then that's when the story gets deep because you're qualified for Paris, and it's funny because the one thing people talk about when they talk about triathlon in Paris is the Seine, horrific water, and that was the story, right? It's like also
Was
for open water swimming, but especially for paratriathlon, or for triathlon and paratriathlon is the
right,
swimming in that water. For some sports like surfing, they went to Tahiti because that was the best place for surf.
right.
Nice would be a wonderful place for triathlon. How much were the athletes chatted with or consulted on? Because you guys knew what the water quality was going to be. It's one thing for the Olympic athletes. We're talking about the para athletes with people who are more susceptible to potentially life-altering, life-changing sicknesses that come out of that. Was there any discussion at all with USA Triathlon, World Triathlon?
Um, so to your acknowledgement, yes, the para population definitely is much more vulnerable in, situations like that. Because a lot of us have underlying health issues that
Of course.
is why we're in para. Um, like leading up to after, I would say after the Olympics, there was a lot more from World Triathlon on the para side with the water. And I would say more specifically kind of like the current, because they saw like the change in the current was potentially going to be unsafe. And I feel like the emphasis was a little bit more on the current than it was the actual
Of the
water
quality.
condition.
Yeah.
Right. I'm not going to say that there wasn't talk of it, but given how some of the able-bodied athletes weren't able to perform in the mixed relay because some of them got sick and they didn't have alternates, I don't feel like that was highlighted enough, and I don't feel like they as in World Triathlon, and even maybe USA Triathlon, were looked at that and said, how can we put up a plan or something, some type of safety net for if these individuals do get sick? How do we identify them? How do we track this? How do we make sure that we give the best attention for health?
Right.
And I think that's the thing, is like looking back, I mean, I'm in prepare mode. So did I pay attention? Sure, I paid attention, but sometimes it's like, here's my piece of the pie, and this is what I got to do, and you trust others that they're going to handle their piece of the pie, and that would be athlete safety.
So going in, and I look at 2023, you're undefeated. You win Yokohama, you win Montreal, you win Paris. So you've won on the course. You win Long Beach, and you qualify for Paris at Ponte Vedra. So you're on a roll, right? Going into the games, you're the overwhelming favorite for your
Yes.
category. I don't think I'm speaking out of school on that. I think people thought that you could win by 1 or 2 minutes in that event. So they have the familiarization swim. And is that something that's mandatory? Something that obviously this is a different from a flat bay where you normally swim. So what was the sense of, do we go in that water knowing that it's probably a little sketchy? What was the thought process going into that the pre-swim?
So I don't think I'd be speaking out of term saying that overall from the team, there was a little bit of hesitancy, but given the water current and given what we saw out of the Olympic races,
Yeah.
and knowing that our current was potentially as strong or stronger, and then World Triathlon made a lot of different rule changes in terms of like safety nets, things that we could do. If there was extra pontoons, there were extra floats out there that if we needed to hang on because we were tired, we were allowed to, which typically, you can't do that.
Right.
If someone floated too far off the course, they were like, hey, we need to have a safety net because we don't want, this particular athlete to not be able to finish. So there were some extra things that they did put in place. I remember talking it over with my coach and some others, and we just decided that, like, I felt that it was best I go in there on the first day that swim familiarization was offered, because again, some of the lines that you needed to take, they were super tricky. And even on that first one, I know that I didn't quite get them right, but it was like, you just need to go out there and feel it. And that was my thing. I was like, I just need to feel this. And then I went and watched, and I had others videotape. So I was just like, let me see what I did. Let me see how I can do it right. And let me see what others are doing. So I felt good about the game plan. Everybody that I spoke to, we felt good about the game plan that I created, or I would say we created for my race. However, I didn't get to the race.
Right. So when you did win in Paris the year before, was it in the Seine?
No, it was not in the Seine because water quality. So we did not get to practice. We got to do the practice. We got to do the familiarization in the Seine for the test event, but we did not get to swim a full triathlon. We ended up turning it into a duathlon for the
Into a
Paris test
duathlon.
event.
And when you did the familiarization swim the year before, any issues? You get sick afterwards?
No, no issues.
Interesting. Okay, so you do the familiarization swim, and how long was it before you start feeling sick?
It wasn't until the next day. So on the 29th
Yeah.
of August would have been the familiarization swim. And that would have been roughly, 8, 9 o'clock in the morning. And then the next day we were down at the venue again. And I just remember going back to the village and getting off the bus sometime before like noon.
Hmm.
And even on the bus ride, I was like, man, I'm not quite feeling right. But I just, nerves, races coming
Sure.
soon. It's a hot bus. It's a little humid out. You kind of chalk it all up to those things. So go up to the room. I'm like, maybe I just need to lay down. Maybe I need to take a shower. All these things. And I just progressively started feeling bad until I started violently vomiting that lasted many, many hours. Many hours,
Hours.
many hours,
Hours. Oh my God.
to the point where I missed the race brief because I was violently vomiting. And it took me hours just to get my head out of the toilet to even make my way downstairs so that I could go over to the clinic. It still is one of those moments where it's been traumatic for me.
So when you go to the clinic, what did they say? Did they do some tests? Did they give you any type of medication?
So I explained to them that I had swam in the Seine. I explained to them that I was one of seven living in, our room suite.
Hmm.
I wasn't tested. I wasn't treated. Well, I can't say that I wasn't treated. I definitely wasn't tested. I was treated. I was given some anti-emetic medications, and then I was given some tablets. But due to anti-doping rules, they chose to not do the paperwork or send me to the hospital, where getting an IV would be. I wouldn't need to have basically the paperwork needed for anti-doping. And then I was sent back to my room and not isolated. I knew that like there was something seriously wrong at this point. It felt like it was a little more than initially. I just kind of thought maybe I ate something bad, didn't settle well with my stomach. I'm kind of beyond that, and quite honestly, I'm really kind of concerned about am I going to be able to be better for this race?
Right.
So I had specifically asked to get an IV. There was discussion that there was going to have to be some paperwork done for anti-doping, and they didn't want to do the paperwork, so I wasn't able to get an IV. I wasn't tested, and then I specifically said that I was one of seven in a room suite. So even
Right.
though there were separate rooms, there's seven of us in this suite, and then I specifically said I have a roommate. So please, isolate me, whatever. But like, I can't get other people sick. At that point, I was thinking about other people because I'm
Of
like,
course.
this is bad. So I was never tested. I was giving a minimal amount of IV fluid that had some antiemetic in it to help me with the nauseousness. And when I say a little amount, like you're only allowed 100 milliliters. So we stopped before 100 milliliters. So 100 milliliters is absolutely nothing, in the world of IV fluids. And I was given some tablets that I could take, to help out with nauseousness. And I was sent back to my room without being isolated.
So let me ask you this, because I remember a number of people were getting COVID during that time, or were sick with COVID, and obviously they were isolated and moved out of the dorms or
Right.
out of the village. But and you told them you were staying with other people, so the no testing. 'Cause at this point, you don't know what you have.
I don't
Uh,
exactly. I don't
yeah.
know.
So, and that was from the clinic saying they couldn't do anything, or was there a team doctor or anything like that?
The one of the chief medical officer for the USOPC, he was there. Quite honestly, I'm not sure who made what calls because I had so much abdominal pain that like they pushed me over in a wheelchair, and even sitting up straight, like the fetal position was my friend. And so I can't speak to exact specifics of how they came to certain
Right.
conclusions because I was just not in a good way. I just know that like I was very specific about I have a roommate who is one of my great friends and I respect her, and I'm like there's no way I can get her sick, and not just her, but there's six other athletes that I'm
Right.
sharing a room with.
Yeah.
What I did come to find out is that day of swim familiarization, there were six US athletes that got in, and three of us became ill the next day. The two other males that were ill, one was tested, one was not. But both of the males were isolated in, I don't know if they had their own rooms. I don't know if they were putting a room together, but I know that they were taking out of the rooms that they were originally given when we got to the village, and they were separated.
And no testing for you.
No testing for me.
Anybody ever explain that to you?
I've asked Bob, and I have not got any answers on that at all.
Okay, so now you're back at the village
I'm back
and
at the village.
you're sick. And is the next day the Paralympics?
No, so the next day was not the Paralympics. So I got sick on the 30th. The
Yes.
next day was, I believe there was another day to go down to the course, but not swim. And then the following day, on the first, we were supposed to race. However, on the first, the water quality was poor, so the race got pushed to the second.
Right.
But the next day, so my family had an Airbnb, and I just felt I'm going to be able to recover better, a better bed. Like I wasn't able to get up and get water, and I'm in a suite full of other athletes preparing for a race. The last thing that they should be able to do or want to do is take
Oh,
care of a
good.
sick person.
Yeah,
So I felt that like the best way for me to potentially recover was to go to the Airbnb, and my family can, basically, hand
take
and
care
foot
of you,
take care of me. And then again, I have a little bit more freedom in terms of the amenities. It just makes you feel better.
of course.
Unfortunately, when I got to my Airbnb early on Saturday morning, I never left the Airbnb for days.
At that point, were you still thinking, okay, I've got a couple days here, I can still race?
I did. I mean, there were moments where I'm like, I'm done. Then there were moments where I'm like, okay, we can do this. And one of those moments was when I woke up and they, pushed the race back a day. And I was like, okay, I have a whole nother day.
Yeah,
But the issue was I wasn't able to eat or drink other than a few sips and a few bites of this, that, and the other. And, I didn't get out of bed. Like going and taking a shower and brushing my teeth and going to the bathroom was about the most that I could do. So I laid in that bed. Like I had hopes to get out of that bed, but it just didn't transpire.
so here you are, you're one of the favorites for the gold medal, and I would assume that this would raise some people within the organization would be thinking, oh my God, what can we do for Kelly? What can we do to help her out? What can we do to make sure we get her to the starting line? What with the coaches, the medical team, what help did they provide at that point?
Um, there was some communication with the program manager, but at one point, she essentially kind of asked why my communication with her was a little bit shorter and a little bit more fragmented. And I felt like I had to explain to her, like, I'm laying in a bed, extremely sick. Yes, I met my Airbnb. Yes, it was my choice, but I did not know that this sickness was going to be as
Awful.
intense as it was and linger on like it did. And unfortunately, nobody came to the Airbnb to check on me on race morning. I did get up on race morning and I was like, okay, like I'm going to give this a go. Like I pulled together all the energy. And while I was sitting down eating breakfast, even, I had a family member look at me and was just like, you don't look right. And I'm like, I don't feel right. And I knew in that moment, I was like, I'm not racing. Like,
Right.
I just can't do this. So I asked to go back to the clinic Actually, no, I didn't ask to go back to the clinic. I asked to go to the hospital. I told my coach I want to go to the hospital. I said,
Yeah.
please take me to the hospital. She left the race course. She came to my Airbnb. She got me. I'm not sure what transpired, but she just said, hey, we're going to take you back to the village. And then by means of the village, I guess, get me to the hospital. That was maybe her understanding. Again, it was 4 or 5 days of just pure hell for me. So I'm just at this point being, pushed along to say, like, here's where you need to go. I go back to the clinic at the village, and the only thing that they did was vital signs. I was not tested again. I was not treated. I asked to go to the hospital. I asked for IV fluid at this point.
Yeah,
You
because you know
know,
you're not racing at this point. At this point, it's all about getting better.
yes, and they were like, well, anti-doping, and I remember them saying something about anti-doping. I said, I'm not racing, you guys.
Yeah.
I don't care. Like, we shouldn't care at this moment. Like, send me to the hospital if paperwork is what you don't want to do, because, that's the clear path to not doing paperwork and getting, proper treatment.
So no, nobody's taking you to the hospital.
Nobody took me to the hospital.
That's unbelievable. And at this point, no testing, nobody knows what you have. You know you can't race. So
Yes.
it's I'll take an IV. I just got to get better.
Yes.
You've
I
got
was at
family.
the clinic roughly minutes before, the race was starting, and I was leaving the clinic, and they were sending me back to my Airbnb as the race, was kicking off. So, like, I already knew, like, it's kind of game over for me.
So at that point, you're sick as a dog, and your dream of racing in your second Paralympics and medaling, which you were a favorite, is out the window.
It's out the
Uh,
window.
you got the Airbnb and your family's there. Now you're got to be worried about, am I going to get somebody else sick? Is somebody else from the family going to get sick? What was the plan at that point? Was there a conversation with USA Tri? Was there a conversation with the doctor of, okay, the treatment changes now because I'm not an athlete anymore. I'm somebody who's very ill and somebody with a nursing background, somebody who's a medic, a military.
Yes.
I understand what's going on and there's something wrong, seriously wrong.
Yes.
What happens next? What did happen next?
I went back to the Airbnb. Some of the comments that I made, or that were made to me, about, like, I mean, I had some staff members asking me if I was watching the race. And I'm like, I'm sitting in bed, like, hurting,
Right.
and now hurting because I'm not racing. No, I'm not watching the race. Like, I am struggling at this point badly with a lot of different, things going on. Quite honestly, there was not a lot of reaching out. I didn't really have a lot of conversations with individuals at that point. I kind of left that up to my coach, and I just kind of put the phone aside because, I mean, I was not in a very good place mentally.
No, no.
And that evening, one of my other family members, I woke up from a nap or whatever and heard them in the bathroom, and I was like, that sounds like what I was going through a couple days ago. So I ended up getting my family sick as well.
So your family got sick
My family got sick
from something you weren't even tested for. So we
from
weren't even.
something. Yes, that's correct.
How do you, it's one thing to be sick and laying in a bed. It's another, okay, the Paralympics are over. Now you got to fly home. Family's got to fly home. Those are long flights
Long.
when you're sick. That's horrific. What was that experience like? Just getting from Paris and getting home and getting the family home.
So I was very concerned then with my daughter. She's 16, and we had intended to stay through closing ceremony. And prior to that would have been her 16th birthday. So we were going to do it up big for her 16th birthday.
Sure.
After she saw me getting sick, family getting sick, she said, I want to leave. I want to get out of here. I don't want to be here, which I don't blame her. Thankfully, my coach lives in San Antonio, and she said, I'll take her with me. We're leaving the next day. So I was able to change flights for her and get her on the flight to get out of there, because I was not healthy enough to leave at that moment. And I knew that I had the Airbnb for a little bit longer. So I was just like, let's just see if I can get to the point where, I can get on this plane and get home. And I white knuckled that plane ride majority of the time. That was rough. It was incredibly, incredibly hard on my gut. Like there was moments where I'm just like, I don't think I can do this, but I'm sitting in a seat for the next 7 hours. But I desperately just wanted to be home in a place that was familiar so I could go get people that I knew, loved, and cared and believed me that I was not feeling well.
Did you feel abandoned? That basically
Absolutely.
the team just was like, okay, Kelly's sick, forget about her.
I reached out, after my family got sick, and it was late. It was later on, so I knew that the potential for people to respond that late in the day was slim, and that's fair. But the next morning, the one individual that's always been very supportive, he reached out, and then there were a few others that was just like, I'm busy right now, call you later. Someone else didn't respond until well into the afternoon. I it I think the thing that compounds all of this is we have to go back to about June leading up to Paris. And that's when one of the most important people in my everyday life and a huge supporter passed away. So not only was I going through a sickness, but I was grieving an individual that filled a parental role, a family role, a friend role, a supporter role. And he was also my prosthetist. He the only person for over 10 years to make my legs in life and in sport. And he welcomed me into his family. My childhood was extremely abusive. So I never knew what unconditional love was until this man showed me and allowed me to make mistakes in life and then share with me what unconditional love looks like and feels like. So I was grieving desperately.
Yeah.
And on top of it, we had made it a goal to get to Paris together. So it's probably some of my reasonings for continuing to push, even though that I knew that I was sick for those many days leading up to the race, was because I was like, I want to start something that we finished. He had hopes of even watching when he knew he couldn't be there. And then him passing away, I was like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to finish our goal.
Right. For him.
Fortunately, I wasn't even able to race. So, quite honestly, Bob, I was in a very, very dark place. And the
Yeah.
fact that many did not even acknowledge the grief I was going through, compounding with the sickness, um, it was extremely, extremely lonely, very lonely.
I bet. Well, and you had Shelley. You had your
I had
coach.
Shelley.
She was from chatting with her the other day, she sounded like she was there. She was there every step of the way.
Shelley is probably one of the main reasons I'm still here today. Shelley put her arms around me and said, I love you. We're going to get through this.
Yeah.
If it wasn't for Shelley, like she took my daughter and made sure she got home safe. I don't do that with just anybody. You
Right.
got to earn some serious trust with me because I've been a single parent since day one and I don't have a lot of family support. So for me to ensure that my daughter's going to get home safe by someone else, who you got to earn some big trust points with me. Shelly has been the only one really to advocate for me,
Yeah.
to stick up for me, to say, I believe you, to say that, hey, some of these actions that has been pushed on you have been wrong. She really has kind of been the person who has guided me to say, like, we're going to get through this. And we are. Some days are pretty low, and some days we have some high ones. So,
But what's interesting to me is when I reached out to you, I knew none of this. All I knew is here's this amazing woman who's been, really killing it at the para-tri level, Paralympic level, and now, hey, it'd be fun to have Kelly come over potentially and do an Ironman sometime or 70.3. What are her thoughts? And you're like, Ironman, I can't do this. Is March. We're talking the Paralympics were in early September, and
yes.
still not right. Your body is, what have, now that you've been able to go to see doctors, what do they say?
The biggest thing that majority of them says anytime I go in there is, why was there a delay in testing and treatment? And I can't give them an answer. I don't know that answer.
Did USA Try answer that when you ask them?
Um, no, not really. I feel like there's been, some words, but like there's no reason not to give someone an IV who comes in and says, I was sick swimming in the Seine, and then repeats a follow up after 4 or 5 days of saying, I've been able to eat and drink very little. I have 20 years of military medicine. We give out IVs for much smaller things than that. And I'm not, you have to follow, there's some times where it's like, we probably shouldn't have done that, but we did. By all means, like, I'm not saying that you have to give them out for anybody that comes in and asks, but my situation was very much appropriate for IV
you
treatment.
know when someone needs an IV, and you knew that you needed an IV.
I knew that I needed an IV. If I was back here in the United States and would have went to the emergency room, I would have gotten an IV. Would have, if I were to say I swam in a body of water and the very next day, even if we were stateside, and the very next day I'm sick, most likely IV. Let's do some testing. Let's see, because there's plenty of people who get sick with E. coli here in the States from swimming in bodies of water. So it is not a foreign idea that this can't happen anywhere, especially a river that has been very prone to decades and centuries of dirty, just water.
Was there ever were the teams spoken to and said, listen, obviously the French are very sensitive to any negative comments about the Seine. We want to make sure we're not saying anything, and if you do get sick, we don't want people to talk about it. Was there any type of conversation like that, or what? Because it just seems weird that people got sick, and like, I didn't know. I knew that you didn't race, but I didn't know that you were still sick at this point.
Right. There really wasn't any conversation about, what to say, what not to say, and that I heard.
Right.
But, even afterwards with the race, there was no acknowledgement on social media of why I didn't race. And even when reaching out to, the social media team and just saying, hey, like, all Olympic athletes and Paralympic athletes, except me, had acknowledgement of the race. And to this day, there's still been no acknowledgement as to why I did not race in Paris.
So there was nothing afterwards put out by social media saying, Chris Hammer got this medal and Mohammed, and unfortunately Kelly was not able to race because she got sick. Nothing along those lines.
No, like, so there was, featured on athletes of, we're just going to stick with Chris Hammer because you say Chris Hammer, gold medal, PTS 5 men, they all had their own little, picture, little caption, their little moment to say, here's what they did.
Right.
I did not have that moment.
Nothing. The social didn't reach out, didn't ask, and when you chatted with them, what did they say?
I reached out to them.
Yeah,
I reached out to them and pointed out to them that I am the only one from anybody who's gone to the Olympics and Paralympics to not be recognized. And still today, that is nothing.
Nothing at all. So when you get home and you're getting tested, what did they figure out that you had?
So at this point, when I got home, I thought that I was just going to be better. I thought I had some sort of virus. I was going to get better. Was not getting better. So I ended up started going to urgent cares. I think it was on a weekend. So I'm about now 9 or 10 days from swimming in the Seine, which any type of virus, now it's starting to shed out of your system. So they may or may not pick it up. But the majority of providers just said the likelihood that it was E. coli is high. And if it's not, the medication that we're going to give you to treat it will basically kill like whatever else. If it's not E. coli, okay, great. Let's do that. So I did that, continued to feel worse, didn't make any progress in getting better until I found worms in my stool. And that's when I knew I had a parasitic infection because I had worms in my stool. So now I'm being treated for parasites, and I don't wish that treatment on anyone. About halfway through, and I ended up doing two. I ended up doing two courses of meds because at this point now they were concerned that it could be all sorts of stuff because the water runoff over there, I mean, it contains animal feces. You
Yeah.
know, you're not just talking about humans, you're talking about animals, and we're talking about farms, you're talking about pesticides, so many things. So they said we really probably should be safe and treat for what most likely is, but even these ones on the very outside of the spectrum. And at this point, I'm like, I don't care. I want to feel better. But I think at that point, now, you know, I was months outside of the Seine. I had months of infections going on. So I was so delayed in any type of treatment that, you know, really the effects, I mean, I'm still dealing with them.
Right.
So yes, treated for parasites, and I was still having a lot of epigastric pain, which I still do today. I had upper and lower scopes. I've had biopsies. I've had food emptying studies. I have more tests coming next week. I've had CTs. I'm getting ready to have a tube down my throat to stick in my stomach for a day to measure the pH because even with medications, even with switching medications, even adding on medications, I'm still having a lot of pain with eating. With eating, I just want to eat and not have
What you
pain.
do? Uh, and any during all this time, the follow-up, USA Triathlon, coaches, doctors, any follow-up at all?
So I would have to say that the majority of the follow-ups I've initiated or my coach has initiated.
Yeah.
Um, there has been a few times that some people have reached out, but I have asked for change. I have asked for accountability. I have asked for why didn't we have some of these safety nets? Why are, you know, my biggest thing is this cannot happen to another athlete. I've had staff members not directly on USAT that have reached out to me and they said, I am so sorry this happened to you. I take full accountability for not doing more. So there are members, but I feel like they are ancillary to the individuals that really need to be talking to me directly about accountability. But this can't happen to another athlete. It just can't. We shouldn't be having someone be celebrating, you know, being at the top of their game now being put like they took away my health. Like that's what we have in life is health. And my health and the struggles I'm having doesn't just affect me. I have a family. I have a kid. I have friends. You know, I have a career. Maybe still in paratriathlon. I don't really know. There's a lot of days where I feel like it's over. But I'm not ready to give up hope. I'm not ready to give up the fight, but I'm also a very realistic individual. And how I've been feeling is not very elite athlete.
What should have happened when you're
Should have been tested.
what should have happened when here's an athlete, it's a couple days before the Paralympics, they're not feeling well. How should that the governing body, the doctors, the coaches, how should moving forward, how should they react?
I mean, whether it's para or, you know, Olympian,
Mhm.
if anybody got sick and they were to come and say, I swam in the Seine, to me, that raises an alert of we need to test, we need to treat, maybe we need to go to the hospital. I don't know, depending on what they are, but that should be a possibility that's kept a little bit higher and definitely isolate. I mean, that's the biggest one is we don't want others to get sick with that. There should have been some sort of follow up that World Triathlon put in place, whether they created the system or not, whether they said, hey, NGBs, you need to create your own, but we have to have some sort of follow up. I don't exactly know. I'm not going to get into the ins and outs of it, but there should have been some sort of follow up plan and or a way for even athletes or people on behalf of the athletes to say, I have not been feeling well because just because you didn't get sick the very next day or even 2 days later, parasitic infection sometimes takes 2 to 4 weeks to show up. And you're also talking about forever chemicals. So some of these may manifest in individuals months, years from now. I mean, the likelihood that I lost my leg due to cancer is probably because of one of my early deployments. It took 10 years for them to figure that, over 10 years for them to figure out. So we're talking about toxic exposure. like I'm living toxic exposure and now I'm living it again. And I think the other thing is believing someone. I asked to go to the hospital. This is the second time I'm coming around. I am foregoing my Paralympic race because I wanted to be in the hospital. And I don't feel that that sentiment was taking nearly as serious as it should have been.
Well, and especially someone who has a medical background like you do. Yeah,
Agreed.
it makes no sense. And in terms of you, there was a point I remember you were telling me that just the coughing, that you were coughing so badly that it was just you felt like you were ripping you're ripping your gut apart. How are you dealing with all of that? Do you feel like some of that has subsided?
It wasn't, I wouldn't say necessarily the coughing, the vomiting was
Vomiting,
the
I'm
biggest.
sorry, vomiting. Yes,
Yeah. The
the vomiting
vomiting,
was so bad that
even
yeah,
after I had vomited everything out of my system, it was the dry heaving
right heaves, right.
that, like, from the very beginning, I had problems in epigastric. I was having some pain. And what I found out is I have a hiatal hernia. And the likelihood that I have that hernia from the violent vomiting is pretty high. So that's most likely what's causing me pain. But we're still trying to figure out. Thankfully, I have a gastro who just says, we're going to do some more investigating because I want to make sure that I get this right for you. So even though I don't want to be as patient as, what he's asking me to be, I do feel that he, instead of throwing things at me, he wants to get more of an accurate, picture, how to help me, essentially recover and get back to training.
Well, I mean, the key is LA 2028 is coming up. It's there's really no reason that you can't be you're dominant. You were dominant going into the games. There's really no reason that you can't do that again if you can get healthy.
Yeah. If I can get healthy. That's the only reason why I won't be able to do that again is if I can't get over this. That's truly the reason. Yes.
Well, Kelly, I am so sorry that you've gone through this. I seriously had no idea. I knew that you couldn't race, and I knew that would be awful. But the health ramifications of all of this have been horrific, and you should not have had to go through what you have gone through. There needed to be a little more caring, a little more consideration. Somebody needed to be reaching out. I mean, don't they have multiple coaches on the team that could have
Yes.
potentially helped out? Because I know your coach is limited because
Yes.
if your coach doesn't have credentials, she can't get into the village. She can't
Yes.
really help you out. So you have to count on what the three coaches that the team has to help out. But they're coaching what, 16, 17 athletes. I know there's some challenges there, but I don't know if they were there to help everybody, or are they just there to help their own athletes?
Well, the coaches selected were there to help everyone because they were considered
Okay.
musical coaches.
Right.
However, my coach, who had the least amount of credentials, did the most. Um, Two out of the three coaches, one had to be encouraged by another individual to reach out to me, and that was many weeks after the games. I heard
Mhm.
nothing from them, and then another coach, to this day, haven't heard anything from him.
Interesting. Yeah. Again, hopefully, it's a learning experience. Hopefully, we can learn from this and make sure that doesn't happen to another athlete. 'Cause I know as a medical professional like you are, that's your main concern is that this doesn't happen again,
Absolutely.
right?
Well, in advocating, sometimes I truly feel like the silence by some individuals lets me know that there is no true desire to advocate. Not just advocate for me, but advocate for change so this doesn't happen again. So if you want to go around thinking this can't happen to your athlete, it can. And I
Right.
think that's what it is. It's like it's a we. It's not a me. It should be a we. And how can you do your part so that we can make the sport a better place? And I feel like this is what I can do. I can share my story. So I appreciate you giving me the time, the platform to put this out there, for caring enough to put this out there, because I don't feel that that has came by means as what it should have since August 30th when I got sick.
Love it. Kelly, thank you for taking so much time. And I'm hopeful we'll see you on the starting line sometime soon. Hopefully this awful chapter gets behind you so that you can go on inspiring people to be their best self. Because every time I've seen you at races, I saw you last year in Long Beach, you're just so positive and so upbeat and always there to help the other athletes. And I hate to see
Thank you,
what
Rob.
you've gone through.
Thank you. I
Kelly,
appreciate that.
Kelly Elmlinger has been our guest. Kelly, thanks again, and feel better, please.
uh, well, shoot, if I could go by that, I would, Bob. Like, just prescribe that for me.
There we go. Again, Breakfast with Bob, our Not Quite Kona edition. Thanks everybody for tuning in. We'll catch you next time. See ya.
Thanks.